Good day everyone, I'm Danica Macabenta from BPED 2D. So now I'm going to answer the activity number 1. Question number 1. What are the major components of an open-loop system? How does this type of control system differ from the closed-loop systems? Describe how each of components of the open-loop system might function for a person who is tossing an empty soft drink can into a recycling bin. We use open-loop control system in many applications of our day-to-day life. A control system which doesn't have any feedback connected to it is called an open-loop system. This type of system don't depend upon its output. Example in open-loop systems. Output is not used as a control variable for the system and it has no effect on the input. The main difference between an open-loop system and a closed-loop system is that a closed-loop system has the ability to self-correct while the open-loop system does not. Consequently, closed-loop systems are often called feedback control systems while open-loop systems are also known as non-feedback controls. The open-loop system is more stable as compared to a closed-loop system. A person who is tossing an empty soft drink can into a recycling bin when these goods are recycled. They are combined with similar products containing various materials other than the desired recycle, resulting in waste. Open-loop recycling is often associated with the degradations of the material being recycled and the loss of attached materials that are not being recycled like the empty soft drink can. This means that the input in the recycling process is converted to a new raw materials which can be used as an input into another manufacturing process. How do we know that the motor program exists? Discuss two of the three types of research evidence that suggest support for the motor program notion. How does each illustrate that individuals plan their movements in advance? Motor program advocates are concerned with the memory but they are not much interested in the learning operations that store the movement sequence in memory in the first place, so they fail to specify how the program is acquired. One of the most important ideas in a motor control is that the movements are controlled by an open loop process with the centrally stored structure which is motor program, responsible for the grading, timing, coordination of muscle activities necessary for skilled movement behavior. The motor program idea has had many forms, and it is difficult to characterize the various notions under this banner. There are, however, a few features which serve to define these kinds of ideas reasonably well. Three lines of evidence support the existence of a motor programs. The notion of a GMP has a great deal of initial appeal. It seems efficient for each motor program in our movement to be able to generate a class of movement sequences. This reduces not only the potential storage problems that would result if different programs were needed each time the movement requirements change, but also would reduce potential retrieval problems that would be associated with selecting from among group of similar motor programs. The notion of a GMP is also consistent with our experience with computer programs and electronic video devices. Indeed, the record player analogy often used to describe the invariant and variant features of the GMP fits in the intuitive appeal. There is also a good deal of evidence that participants can execute movements sequence using different effectors. How do humans produce novel movements? Are such movements really new? Provide an example of novel movement that might be produced by a shuffleboard player, a professional golfer, an airplane pilot, or a wheelchair basketball player. The major theories that have been formulated to account for control of human movements are this inverse dynamics approach, generalized motor program theory, equilibrium point hypothesis, and optimal control approach. Although each of these approaches has provided invaluable contribution to development of our knowledge about human movement control, they all have significant limitations. An organizing principle is also necessary if the task can be performed with a single motion because the pattern of muscle activation that results in this motion is still needs to be determined. The generalist motor program theory proposed that a set of control commands required for performance of each particular movement is stored in a memory. A motor program needs to be learned independently for each movement type. This organization of control is in conflict with experimental findings showing that learning of specific movement may generalize to movements that require completely different patterns of muscle control and hence different motor programs. Novel movements are movements that are slightly different from those we habitually use day to day. Often, when we experience pain with a specific movement, our brains create a loss associating between the pain experience and movement of the limb of area of the body. Novel movements describe a process of altering the context and manner in which painful movements are performed in order to change the result from one pain and limitation. So, shuffleboard, more precisely shuffleboard, and also known as floor shuffleboard. It is the game that novel movement has produced in which players use to push weighted discs, sending them gliding down a narrow court with the purpose of having them come to rest within a marked scoring area. So, in professional golfer, their actions are completely changes and it produces novel movement. Airplane pilot. An aircraft pilot or aviator is a person who controls the flight of an aircraft by operating its directional flight controls and the wheelchair basketball player are produced or making a novel movement because of the permanent severe leg disability or paralysis of the lower portion of the body. Will benefit through participation in wheelchair basketball and would be denied the opportunity to play basketball were not for the wheelchair adoption is eligibly. So last question is what is the generalist motor program? Indicate how this concept allows us to explain the way performers adjust their movements to meet different sets of environmental demands. Using the U selected in the previous question, explain how the generalist motor program might function to produce the performer's novel movements. So, a generalist motor program is thought to develop our practice and provides the basis for generating movements sequence within a class of movements that share the same variant features such as sequence, order, relative time, and relative force. In professional golfer, their actions are completely changed and it is produced a novel movement, so a learner has to acquire movement coordination pattern and has to learn to discriminate conditions that determine the movement from the one that does not influence it. In the later stages of learning, a goal of learning differs depending on the type of skills.